Hello, everyone, and welcome to our short webinar on optimizing specialty coating operations with precision rolls. This is a pretty general webinar because we know there are so many different types of coating operations out there. There's the laminating operations. So we tried to be a little general with this. We want you to reach out to us if there's a more specific webinar or more specific information that you're interested in around your coating operations or around your processes in general. So before we get started, I'd like to say that we appreciate everybody being online. We trust that you're staying safe and healthy during this continued COVID situation. We encourage you to reach out to us virtually if we're not able to get to your facility in person, because there's a lot that we can do with data collection and troubleshooting and being a value-added provider for you during this time as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. How can precision rolls drive optimization? Well, it starts with grinding to proper tolerances and shape. It's all about reducing variation through your coater, and then the effects that has downstream. Reducing variation on your laminator, and again, the effects it has downstream. But there's also a component to mechanical and machining services that really maximize the performance of your rolls and your roll life. Included in that, I should say, is startup. How quickly do you start up with a newly serviced set of rolls? And at the end of the day, your roll service provider should be committed, as we are, to providing true economic value that's documented. And again, we go back to reducing variation where we started this slide. By reducing that variation, you can shift your process into areas that are more optimized and generate revenue through that optimization. So driving operational excellence. Again, it comes down to variation, right? Eliminating barring or machine direction variation. Sometimes people call it corrugations, barring, whatever the terminology that you want to use. But without optimum roll roundness and concentricity, that machine direction variation, although it may not be obvious on your machine, is causing issues downstream and how that product is formed. How you have to dry that product, and so on and so forth. So we talk about roll roundness and we talk about concentricity. Not only does the face of that roll need to be round, but it needs to be concentric to the journal so that you're not putting, in essence, a cam in your coater. It's also the shape of the roll. It's reducing variation in the cross direction or reducing profile variation. That needs to be accomplished through proper roll shape. Again, these are all grinding and servicing issues that we would encourage you to take a really close look at. And what's the end result? The end result should be material savings in one manner or form, right? If you're able to reduce a streak on the profile of your coating or your lamination process, if you're able to reduce machine direction variation as you're producing that, then you're able to operate your equipment and your coater in a range where you're putting the minimum amount of product on that you need to meet not only your quality goals, but your production goals. Secondly, it's roll life between grinds. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this webinar, but the closer you start to perfectly round, the more life you get out of that roll. And that sounds intuitive, but we'll talk about exactly why that is. So let's start with roundness. Reducing variation in roll total run out or roundness. We have a couple infographics here, one on an improperly ground roll and one on a precision ground roll. And it's obvious, right? One's not very round from the looks of it, one's round. The point of this is to encourage you to take a very close look at the grind reports you get from your service provider, and take a really close look at the scale on which those final grinds are plotted. You can see on the left-hand side, there's an outer roundness issue. Plus, if you go around the face of the roll, you see that there's some machine direction variation that has been ground into that roll as well. On the right-hand side, obviously, is what you want to see. Not only the roundness, but the lack of deviation as you go around the surface of that roll and its circumference. Why does the graph on the left-hand side happen? Well, we'd ask you to keep some things in mind. First, grinding on bearings. You can't achieve, if I go back one slide, the infographic on the right-hand side is almost impossible to achieve if you're grinding in bearings. And why is that? Well, the roll moves when it's ground. There's play in the bearings by design. It also moves in and out with defects. The roundness that we're speaking of in the original manufacturer specification is not possible in most cases when you grind in bearings. The true concentricity certainly is not possible because you're not grinding the face of that roll in reference to the journal. And then the shape is not attainable as well. So not only is it affecting the roundness and the machine direction variation as you go around the circumference of that roll, it's in turn affecting the shape of that roll too. So when it comes to cross direction variation, when it comes to profile variation, it's also critical that the roll not be ground in bearings. There's limits to other types of grinding too. We picked block grinding here. It may or may not apply to what you're doing, but it does apply in many industries. And again, this is a general overview for coating and laminating, but for any other potential industry as well. Machine direction material variation can't be optimized when you're grinding in-house or you're block grinding. The cross direction variation also cannot be, and it's just not uniform. Unfortunately, when you grind in place, in many cases you're compounding the issues that are already there in your roll. So if there's a skew in the roll, if there's a profile issue in the roll, or if there's machine direction variation, the way that in-house or in-place grinding happens, you're generally following that and you're compounding it. So the proper way to grind is to grind on the journals so that you know your concentric from the journal to the face of the roll, and you can provide the proper roundness and the proper shape. Precision roll grinders grinds down in the area that's shown. And the reason we put this up here is because you can see right in the middle of this spreadsheet is coating and coating. Down in the 1 micron to 1.3 micron range. And a micron is 40 millionths of an inch. So there are a number of applications we know within the coating world that take this kind of tolerance. You have to make sure that you're working with a partner on your roll grinding and services that can achieve those tolerances. And 10% of our work has tolerance of less than 2.5 microns or less than 1/10. Our typical work is 2/10 or 2/10,000ths of an inch. So we're very, very comfortable down in those ranges where certain specialty coating applications have to take place. And again, it goes back to reducing that variation, which leads to material savings and leads to more optimal running. So let's talk a little bit about material savings. Reducing variation in material thickness. And we say material because if you say coating, there's a number of coating applications out there. There's a myriad of processes, whether it be a machine coater on a paper machine, or a coater making specialty medical products, or somebody laminating a substrate or laminating something to a substrate. It all comes down to the same principles. And that's first is to reduce the material usage, reduce the coating, reduce the laminate, reduce the starch compound perhaps in a coating type application that you're putting onto the sheet due to thick or wavy profiles. If you're going through your unit operation with machine direction variation and cross direction variation, you're not applying an even amount of product. what we've found time and time again with our partners in the industry is that you have to add more product than might be necessary to make up those differences, to fill in the valleys and the voids, if you will. Reduce defects due to localized thinning in the material profile. We've seen that on a number of occasions as well, that the application of the coating itself produces thin areas because the roll profiles aren't properly ground, and that causes defects. And then just improved end product construction. Again, reducing variability, right? The product on the back side of the machine ought to match the product on the front side of the machine. The product that was made 100 feet downstream or upstream should match what you're making right now. And again, that comes back to roll roundness and concentricity for machine direction variability, and roll shape for that cross direction variability. And end product construction is very important. In many of our customers' coating operations, they're in turn sending it to another converter that is turning it into an end-use product for the consumer. There are certain quality specifications they must meet for that next level of product to be constructed properly. So again, one of the sayings that we like to use at Precision Roll Grinders is tons of your production can come down to tens of thousands of an inch. These are precision unit operations. Coaters are very precise pieces of equipment. Laminators are very precise pieces of equipment, and you need precision rolls to match that. So let's talk about roll shape a little bit. Lost material, this is an actual case study where we've got target material thickness signified by the dotted green line there. An additional material is being used due to poor roll shape, because that target, there needs to be a certain band of control around that target material thickness. And if the peaks were lowered, then the areas that were below the dotted green line would be too low and outside of the control limits. So again, what do? You have to overcompensate for it, and it ends up in material loss or coating loss. With good roll shape, it's not perfect, but significantly better, and you're able to shift the usage down to maintain control within your control limits around your target material thickness. So again, from a shape standpoint, it's also very critical to have proper roll grinding and servicing. You ought to be also working with a supplier and for your roll grinding and servicing that works through the economics with you. This is an example, obviously nobody's numbers in particular. We're certainly cognizant and sensitive to the non-disclosure agreements that we have out there and would never share that. But these are just numbers that are plugged in as an example to look at all the different variables that go into total cost of operation around your rolls. All too often we think of roll services as just a line item maintenance cost. It's really an investment. It's an investment in your production. It's an investment in your machinery. It's an investment in your time going forward to produce the best product, the most consistent manner possible. So we look at the initial grind cost. Precision roll grinders could be a lot higher than a competitor. However, how much roll life are we getting out of that versus that other grind? And what are the savings associated with that? What are the production hours that may be lost because of breaks around a coater or a laminator due to poor roll shape, around issues of off quality, which is the scrap while running improperly ground rolls, production speeds. If you're having to run more material through a coater or a laminator or some type of unit operation, then that's got to be conditioned downstream. It's got to be dried. It's got to reach a final set of specifications for moisture content, for strength, and for those kinds of things. So again, you got to look at the whole picture holistically to get a really good idea. And at the end of the day, your investment in that roll service needs to prove itself. we'll come back to that, but let's talk a little bit about the other component of proper roll servicing, and that's the mechanical and in some cases when needed machining aspects of it. This is a list. I'm not going to go down through every one of them, but rolls have journals. Rolls have bearings they run in that need to be inspected, and they've got bearing seats that need to be proper for that to run properly. Sometimes there's new journals that need to be added to a roll. There's housings that need to be replaced, balancing of the rolls. All these things are critical. So roll life and startup also comes from mechanical excellence. So precision maintenance is more than just precision grinding. Again, you can see there's some pictures there before and after of what the bearing seat looks like. Somebody fully inspecting a bearing. We work with all the bearing suppliers. We work with our partners, our industry partners, to make sure everything is absolutely right on that roll. So thorough inspection, proper assembly, replacing worn and damaged bearings and bushings and other components, the journal repairs that we talked about, that all contributes to starting up on time and producing profitable product quickly and then consistently for the life of that roll. Surface temperature, there may be some cases where there's surface temperature issues. They can also play a role reducing sheet scorching and hot spots, preventing thermal runout. Again, it may not apply to many coating applications, but it's something that that we talk about just briefly, just as an indicator of the breadth of services that you need to consider when looking at your roll services around a unit operation. This is just a nice graphic around, again, mechanical excellence in roll life and startup. What do the closures look like? Are they thoroughly inspected? Are the journals right? Are your bearing seats in the right condition, in the right size? Are there any internals to the roll, whether they be fluid passages or whether they be hydraulics or what have you, that that need to be thoroughly inspected again and rebuilt when necessary, or cleaned? The profile of the roll, the shape that we've been talking about, the surface finish itself. Is there a certain RA finish that you need? In many cases in coating and laminating, that's the case. So it's all encompassing mechanical excellence and grinding excellence to provide the roll that you need for your process. So let's talk about that. Having that mechanical excellence as a foundation, why do rolls that are ground closer to perfectly round run longer? Well, the wear on a roll is a function of the deformation in that roll, whether that deformation be around the circumference in machine direction or whether it be in shape. So, and it's not linear. As you can see, it starts very slowly, and then as the deformation increases, then the wear increases. It's almost like the washboarded country dirt road effect, right? So this is, again, a real world case where we looked at roll life versus a competitive grind that was 4 times as high. Now, in many cases, people will say, well, why do I need 2 10,000ths? I've always been getting away with 8 10,000ths or 1,000th on my roll roundness. Well, this is a primary reason why it's critical. At 2 10,000ths, it takes a year in this case, and it will fluctuate, but this is pretty standard. We've seen this repeated. It takes a year just to get to the starting tolerance that you start perhaps with a competitor grind. And then in 6 months, that roll that started at 8 10,000ths or 1,000th is at a point where it needs to be reground due to quality issues. Whereas the roll that started at 2 10,000ths is way beyond that in life. So we're encouraging you to keep that in mind as part of the entire package around roll servicing and particularly roll grinding. So our promise is to provide that value and to provide analysis and statistics that prove that value. So we're committing to helping our partners reduce process variation and therefore increase profits. So you can see by the little graphic on the right hand side, it starts with data. We have an application engineering group, and our account managers are very skilled at identifying that data with you, designing an experiment to collect that data based on the process changes that you want to make, the variabilities in your process that you want to reduce. And then obviously the object is to do what that center graph shows, is the distribution of that variation before and after proper roll grinding. What's that mean? Can we put that into a formula so that you know what to expect time over time over time? And then at the end of the day, it's got to drive to true economic value for you. So we're doing that virtually with our customers and our partners right now. We can do that through your data or through samples that you can send us. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. But at the end of the day, we're committed to providing that value, real concrete economic value. And we again encourage you to ensure that you're getting that from your roll grinding providers. This is an example, again, of a case study where you can see on the left-hand side the two profiles, the before and after, working through a scenario like we showed earlier in the webinar with the spreadsheet on what variables drive what economics. At the end of the day, this just through proper roll grinding and proper roll maintenance, any difference in cost accounted for, the savings for this customer and partner was over $500,000 a year. So this is a commitment to true economic, statistically validated data that Precision Roll Grinders is committed to, and we would again ask you to think about that when considering who's grinding your rolls for your coaters and laminators and any other unit operations you may have. So we thank you for your time. It's been 22 minutes, and wanted to open it up to questions. I will actually unmute all the participants in case anybody wants to ask a question. And we also do have a chat function as well, if you want to utilize that. We did have one question come in. Do you handle chrome and other surfaces? The answer to that is absolutely. We have a long history, a lot of experience with not only chrome, but with tungsten carbide and release coatings, rubber surfaces. We have partners in the industry with respect to chrome and tungsten carbide and other release coatings. We actually have partners that we can work with on the rubber side too. We don't do those coverings ourselves, but we're very accustomed to and have the expertise and the knowledge to grind and polish and finish all those surfaces to whatever your specific application may need. Okay, another question, are you international? Yes, we are. We do work around the globe, and we do have a sales leader in South America. Jefferson Leite is in Brazil, and he leads our efforts in South and Central America as well. So we would encourage you to go out on the website and find those resources, or call us directly at any one of our shops to reach out and reach the proper people. And I will pull up that screen so everybody can see it. One more question. How long do the studies last? That's a really good question. It depends. I know that's an answer that some of you may not be looking for, but it really does depend. And on the front end, we're going to sit down with you and put together an entire design of experiment. In many cases, it's, can we gather 2 or 3 days worth of data prior to a roll change, and then whatever length of time afterwards. We do need to make sure together that there is enough data there to be statistically valid. We put 6 Sigma rigor to this statistical analysis. And we use that kind of software, a Minitab software, to analyze it. We work very closely with a professor of statistics out of Lehigh University, which is close to our headquarters in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So it depends. And in many cases, you as a potential customer or as an existing customer may have plenty of data already that we can begin to analyze and help drive a proper design of experiment, and then look at the downstream effects once proper grinding and roll servicing is put in place. Those are great questions. Does anybody else have anything at this time? Okay. Well, again, we appreciate your time very much, and we would encourage you to reach out to your local account manager if you know who that is. Go visit our website. There's a lot more information there. Reach out to one of these phone numbers, and we'd be glad to talk to you and glad to work through any of those process variations you currently have that we feel may be impacted by roll quality. Okay. Again, thank you. I just want to make sure there were no more questions. We look forward to speaking with you in the future, and wish you the best.